The galaxy ended its last war without firing a final shot. The surrender didn't come with banners or broken fleets. It came with exhaustion. After centuries of endless conflict, after thousands of burned worlds and extinct species, the remaining powers gathered on a ringed moon above a dead planet and signed a document longer than most novels and older than some stars. They called it the Accord of Last Light. Peace was declared, not celebrated. Most saw it as a necessary compromise, a fragile truce wrapped in ceremony. The Council of Species, once a wartime coalition, became the ruling body of the galaxy. Its first law was simple: no more war. Not for conquest, not for revenge, not even for survival. Humanity was invited to witness the signing, but only as guests. Earth had only joined the galactic community 70 years earlier. Their ships were fast, their culture strange, their history troubling. Every species had a past, but humans wore theirs like armor. War heroes were national icons. Victory parades still marched through city streets. They called their soldiers defenders, but they trained them like predators. To the Council, Earth was volatile, intelligent, but unrefined, brave, but unpredictable. They weren't denied a place in the peace. They were just pushed to the edge of it. A ceremonial sector was assigned to them, quiet, unimportant, and far from any major trade route. Earth smiled politely. They accepted the territory without protest. The diplomats nodded. The documents were signed, and the council chambers moved on. Humanity had been filed away. They assumed Earth would settle down. They assumed humans would get bored and fall in line. They assumed wrong. On Earth, there were no parades after the Accord, no fireworks. The reaction was quiet, not because humanity disagreed with peace, but because they didn't trust how it had been built. There was a difference between peace and silence. The Council believed war was a problem that could be ruled away, like taxes or tariffs. Earth had lived through too many centuries of history to believe that. In the mountains of Mars, soldiers trained in underground cities. In the asteroid belts, engineers tested fusion reactors designed to power more than just homes. Colonies were established not just for expansion, but for resilience. Each new outpost was built with hidden bunkers, encrypted communications, and defenses that didn't show up on scans. No one on Earth said it out loud, but the unspoken message was clear: just in case. Back in the council chambers, Earth's silence was interpreted as obedience. That suited humanity just fine. They didn't want to lead. They didn't want to conquer. They didn't even want attention. They just wanted to be ready. Because peace to humans had never been the absence of danger. Peace was what came after you earned the right to protect it. And somewhere in the back of every human mind was the same quiet thought: what happens when someone breaks the rules again? Years passed, and the galaxy moved on. The Accord of Last Light had created a new order, one where peace was not just desired, it was expected. Across the stars, colonies prospered, and trade routes flourished. There were no more invasions, no more space battles, no more catastrophic wars. The galaxy was a picture of serenity, as if time itself had slowed, taken a breath, and settled into the comfort of routine. But humanity did not share that comfort. Earth's corner of space remained quiet, too quiet for some. While the Council basked in their peace, humanity was busy. Unseen by the rest of the galaxy, the inhabitants of Earth were far from idle. The government had signed the Accord, but their people had never fully embraced the notion of eternal calm. The great cities on Earth had grown quieter. The bustling crowds on the streets now spoke in whispers, cautious, as if the wind itself carried the weight of secrets. The silence was not born of passivity, but of calculation. Beneath this silence, something was being forged, something sharp. Military academies across Earth didn't just teach strategy, they taught adaptation. In the skies above Mars, Earth's warships tested technologies never shared with the Council. Eye-controlled targeting systems, stealth fields, and quick-acting drones that could disable an entire fleet before it had a chance to react. These were not weapons meant to conquer, but weapons meant to survive. In the deep asteroid mines, engineers tinkered with new alloys and self-repairing ships. Mining colonies, which appeared harmless to any passing scout, were secretly being turned into military fortresses. When the galaxy's gaze turned elsewhere, Earth's dark side was building its defenses, layer by layer. Yet, despite all this, the galaxy still assumed peace was absolute. They saw humans as just another species content to sit at the edge of the galaxy, far removed from the councils and decisions that shaped the future. Humanity's silence was read as compliance. The Council never bothered to visit Earth directly. Their ambassadors sent reports, conducted audits, and issued reminders about the need for restraint. Earth's leaders nodded, smiled, and sent polite responses. But the people knew better. They had been to war. They had fought to survive when no one else cared. They knew how fragile this peace truly was. Then, a small signal changed everything. A distant colony, one that had been quietly producing resources for years, went dark. No warning, no distress signal, just silence. No one in the galaxy noticed at first. The Council, focused on their endless meetings, barely even acknowledged the disappearance of the outer world miners. But the signal reached Earth's military channels, and they responded swiftly. A fleet of ships, led by Earth's most experienced captains, was dispatched to investigate. They didn't wait for orders. They didn't ask for permission. Humanity had always worked this way. In the silence, they had learned to trust only themselves. As Earth's ships moved through the dark void toward the missing colony, the galaxy's peace seemed far, far away. And somewhere, deep inside humanity's heart, the old feeling stirred. Preparedness. It was time. The void was silent. Too silent. Earth's fleet arrived at the coordinates of the missing colony, only to find what remained of it in ruins. The outer stations were burning. The colony's orbital defenses had been decimated, and no survivors remained. The wreckage of human ships drifted like broken bones in space, a cold reminder of a conflict that had ended with no warning. The only clue to what had happened was the strange, jagged symbols found on the wreckage of a mining vessel. They were unfamiliar, ancient-looking, but they had one thing in common. They weren't human. No one spoke over the comms. No one needed to. Every captain, every officer on Earth's fleet understood the same unspoken truth. The galaxy's peace had just been shattered, and the silence was the calm before the storm. The fleet gathered in orbit, holding position above the smoldering remains of the colony. Earth's commanding officer, Admiral Jane Cole, stood at the helm of the flagship. Her eyes scanned the reports as they came in. She could feel the tension building within the crew. The unknown enemy had already killed thousands, but they had done it silently, like ghosts in the dark. "We need to know who did this," she muttered, her voice barely a whisper. But deep down, she knew the answer wouldn't matter. Whoever they weren't interested in peace. They were interested in something far worse. The transmission came in without warning, a brief broken signal from a surviving mining station, located deep within an asteroid field on the edge of Council space. Help. Attacked. Keldrith. The message cut off abruptly. Admiral Cole clenched her jaw. The Keldrith, a species thought to have gone extinct millennia ago. Aggressive, territorial, and known for their ruthlessness during the wars of the old galaxy. The Council had believed them wiped out. The universe had moved on. They had made their peace. But humans knew better. The Keldrith didn't die, Cole said aloud, as her crew processed the implications. They've been hiding, and now they've come for us. Without waiting for further orders, Cole transmitted her orders to her fleet. Engage. The human ships moved as one, like wolves closing in on prey. There was no hesitation, no fear, only the cold precision of warriors trained for survival. The Caldrith had made the mistake of assuming they were too far from the core systems, too insignificant for anyone to notice. But they had forgotten one thing about humanity. Humans always noticed. The galaxy had forgotten them. But Earth hadn't forgotten the lessons of survival. The Council hadn't realized the storm that was coming. And now, as Earth's fleet sped toward the Caldrith's last known position, the galaxy was about to learn a harsh truth. Peace was a luxury, one that humanity was never going to afford. The Caldrith didn't expect humanity to strike first. They never saw it coming. A silent enemy, the humans moved like shadows through space, their warships cloaked and their tactics unpredictable. The Caldrith had long been the terror of the Outer Rim, ruthless in their conquests. But the human fleet didn't follow the same rules. Admiral Jane Cole's flagship, the Resolute, led the charge. It moved like a predator, closing in on the Caldrith's scattered forces in the dark asteroid belt. The fleet was outnumbered. But that didn't matter. Human ships weren't designed for overwhelming firepower. They were designed for survival. Prepare for the first wave. Cole's voice came over the intercom. Stay tight. Stick to the plan. No mistakes. Her crew moved with practiced precision. The enemy wouldn't know what hit them. The first strike was as brutal as it was sudden. The human fleet split into smaller groups, using the dense asteroid field to their advantage. Each ship was equipped with advanced stealth technology that made them nearly invisible to the enemy sensors. For the Caldrith, accustomed to the predictable tactics of other species, this was a nightmare. A wave of human missiles tore through the Caldrith's defenses, catching them off guard. The humans didn't fire in large barrages like others. Instead, they unleashed concentrated bursts of fire, aimed at specific weaknesses in the Caldrith's shields. In moments, ships that had once been unassailable were falling apart under the human onslaught. Target their engines. Disable them. Don't destroy. Cole ordered. Humanity didn't come to annihilate. They came to control. They came to remind the galaxy that peace could only exist if you were strong enough to keep it. On the ground, human forces were even more unpredictable. When the Caldrith invaded the colony, they expected the usual defense tactics: resistance, then submission. What they got instead were traps, guerrilla tactics, and an unexpected ferocity that broke their advance. The human soldiers fought in tight, disciplined squads, using everything from pulse rifles to explosives in ways the Caldrith had never encountered. They used the environment, underground bunkers, abandoned mines, and even broken civilian structures, to their advantage. It was an insurgency on a scale the Caldrith hadn't prepared for. Don't give them a second to regroup, Cole ordered, watching the battle unfold on the holographic map. We hold the line, or we don't come back. Her words were simple, but her meaning was clear. There was no retreat. There was no negotiating. The Caldrith had made the mistake of thinking that Earth's silence in the galaxy meant weakness. But that was the one thing humanity could never afford: weakness. The galaxy had forgotten that humanity wasn't about to sit quietly and wait for peace to be broken again. The first Caldrith ship that tried to flee exploded before it could make it past the asteroid field. The humans had set up a trap, a minefield disguised as part of the debris. As the pieces of the destroyed ship scattered into the void, the message was clear: this is not the galaxy you thought you knew. The Caldrith had underestimated humanity. They had thought the humans would stand down, would obey the rules of peace, just as every other species had. But they were wrong. And now, in the wake of their surprise attack on Earth's colony, they were reeling. The human fleet continued to decimate Caldrith forces in the asteroid field, using every trick in the book: ambushes, traps, rapid strikes, and guerrilla tactics. Earth's ships operated like ghosts, always one step ahead, always where the enemy least expected them. The Caldrith, who had once been feared across the galaxy for their brutal efficiency, were now the ones scrambling to survive. Meanwhile, the Council was in crisis mode. The leaders who had long basked in the glow of the treaty's success found themselves caught in a nightmare they hadn't predicted. Earth wasn't just defying the peace they had worked so hard to build. They were actively dismantling the fragile peace structure. The council called for an emergency meeting. Ambassadors from every species gathered around the long table in the Great Hall, their faces filled with tension. As expected, the humans didn't show up. They hadn't been invited, and they hadn't asked to be. They had acted. "We cannot allow this," one of the council's senior diplomats, a tall Elysian, said firmly. His voice echoed through the chamber. "The humans are violating the treaty. If we don't act quickly, this could spiral out of control." "What choice do we have?" Another ambassador, a Frelgian, spoke up. His many tentacles twitched nervously. "They've already engaged the Caldrith. The conflict's already begun. If we intervene, we risk igniting the very war we've worked to avoid." "Then we must stop them," the Elysian responded, slamming his fist on the table. "We must make an example of Earth. If we let them break the peace without consequences, then we're setting a dangerous precedent. Other species may follow suit. We've been complacent," a human representative, James Alder, said from across the room. He had been invited to observe, but now his voice rang out with unexpected authority. "We've forgotten that peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from action. We've spent too long pretending that peace was something we could sit on. And when the Caldrith came, you didn't act. You waited." The room fell into an uneasy silence. The human's words hung in the air like a challenge, the implications weighing heavily on the council members. Finally, a voice broke through the tension. It was the high-ranking ambassador from Serene, a species known for their neutrality. "Perhaps the humans have a point. Maybe we've been too focused on keeping peace at any cost. Perhaps peace isn't just about avoiding war. Perhaps it's about ensuring we don't let aggressors rise again. If the Caldrith are back, we'll need to be prepared." The room was divided. The old factions fought for control, but one thing was clear. The council had lost its once unshakable unity. Their grip on the galaxy was loosening. James Alder stood quietly, watching as the debate raged on. Deep down, he knew what was coming. The council would act. They would try to stop humanity. And when they did, Earth would be ready. Humanity had been forgotten, but they wouldn't be ignored anymore. As the council continued its disjointed debate, a subtle revolution was brewing beneath the surface. The galaxy had grown complacent, its members too absorbed in the trappings of peace to notice the cracks forming in their fragile order. But from the shadows, the stirrings of something much older began to rise. Humanity had always been an outlier in galactic politics, a species known for their unpredictability, their boldness, and their stubbornness. Yet Earth's silence after the accord had been a calculated one, a silent rebellion against the false sense of security the galaxy had embraced. No one had realized just how deep the ripples of human action had spread. Until it was too late. Earth's fleet wasn't the only force at work. On the fringe worlds, long forgotten by the Council and left to fend for themselves, whispers began to spread. Human veterans, who had once fought in the old wars, found themselves at the heart of these whispers. They had been dismissed by the galaxy's elite, told that their time had passed. But those same veterans had not forgotten the taste of battle, nor the lessons of survival. And they weren't alone. Across distant star systems, former soldiers of various species, veterans of old conflicts, found themselves watching the rise of humanity's rebellion with quiet admiration. The Caldrith had been their enemies once, and they had seen what humanity was capable of when it was cornered. There was no grand call to arms, no mass uprisings or coordinated attacks. It was something more insidious, a slow, quiet gathering of forces. Small pockets of rebellion formed not around ideology, but around the unspoken realization that peace had a price. And that price was weakness. Humanity had refused to bow to the Council's rules of peace. Now, others were beginning to question those same rules. On the once-forgotten world of Teshkari, a fleet of defector ships gathered. Fleeing from the Council's mandates, they had joined with Earth's unspoken cause. They had all seen the same thing. Peace was not the absence of danger. It was the presence of readiness. Teshkari was a mining world with a past, a history of resistance, and its people had been watching humanity's actions with growing interest. When they saw the first signs of defection, human engineers, former soldiers, and independent scientists, they began to take notes. Their fleet grew slowly at first, unnoticed. By the time the Council realized what was happening, it was too late. The rebellion had already begun, and it was no longer just human. The question wasn't whether Earth could hold its ground against the galaxy. It was whether the galaxy could hold its ground against all of them. The Council, still lost in its debates, failed to see the shift until it was undeniable. The galaxy was no longer united, and at the heart of this fracture was humanity, a species that had once been ignored, then feared, and now respected in ways the Council had never anticipated. Humanity hadn't needed to force its way into the spotlight. It simply let the galaxy's peace crumble under the weight of its own assumptions. The revolution had begun, but it wasn't loud. It was quiet, like a storm gathering in the distance, and humanity was at the center of it all. By the time the Council had realized the depth of the uprising, it was already spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. What had begun with the humans had evolved into something far more complex. The rebellion was no longer just about Earth's struggle against the Kuldrath, or even against the galaxy's peace. It had become a movement, one that sought to redefine what peace really meant. In the outskirts of Council space, in systems long forgotten by the galactic elite, the rebellion had gained momentum. The Teshkari had joined, their fleet now swelling with defectors from every corner of the galaxy. Former soldiers, miners, smugglers, and exiles. They had been ignored by the Council, pushed to the fringes and left to fend for themselves. Now, they were rising. The human message had been simple but powerful. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the readiness to face it. The galaxy had been lulled into a false sense of security, and humanity had shown them the cracks. Now those cracks were spreading, not through violent rebellion, but through a quiet, steady uprising of those who had long been disenfranchised. Admiral Jane Cole stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the holographic map of the galaxy shift and change. The rebellion was no longer just an isolated act of defiance. It had become a system-wide movement. Ships once loyal to the Council were now defecting, joining Earth's cause, or striking out on their own. The rebellion wasn't an army, it was a network, a vast, ever-growing wave of ships and worlds that were questioning the status quo. The Council's response was swift and brutal. They issued a galactic-wide mandate: suppress the rebellion or face total annihilation. But they were unprepared for the unity that had formed between the rebels. The galaxy had never seen a threat like this before, not one born of unity and survival, but one that had quietly brewed under the surface for centuries. The rebellion did not answer the Council's threats with open battle. They didn't need to. Instead, they played a different game, a game of influence, of strategy, and of subversion. The rebellion began to infiltrate the Council's ranks, planting operatives in key positions, sabotaging communication networks, and slowly eroding the Council's power from within. No one knew exactly how it happened, but within a few short months, entire sectors of Council space were in open revolt. Systems that had once been under the tight control of the Council were now either independent or aligned with the rebellion. The galaxy was unraveling, and the Council was helpless to stop it. For the first time since the signing of the Accord of Last Light, the galaxy's peace was under direct threat. But this time, it wasn't just about war. It was about something far deeper: freedom. Humanity, once thought to be a minor player, had shown the galaxy that peace without strength was an illusion. And now, the galaxy was paying the price for its complacency. The echoes of rebellion had become a roar. The galaxy trembled. What had started as a quiet rebellion had now escalated into full-scale revolt. Systems that had once pledged allegiance to the Council were now either neutral or openly hostile. The Council's authority, once absolute, had fractured under the weight of their own complacency. Admiral Jane Cole stood at the helm of the Resolute, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. The rebellion was no longer just a human cause. It had become a symbol for all those who had been left behind by the galactic elite. The Teshkari, the miners, the outcasts of every species, those who had no voice in the council had found one in the rebellion. The humans had shown them that peace was not an entitlement. It was something earned through strength, resilience, and the will to protect what mattered. And in the wake of humanity's actions, others had risen to join the cause. The council was scrambling. They had underestimated the resolve of humanity, and now they were struggling to keep control. The rebellion wasn't a force they could easily crush. It was a tide. And the more they fought it, the stronger it became. They had tried diplomacy, they had tried threats, but the rebellion only grew bolder with each passing day. "We're outnumbered," said Cole's second-in-command, Commander Liu, "and the Council's forces are starting to regroup. We need to make a decision, Admiral. Do we push forward, or do we wait for them to make the first move?" Cole's gaze remained fixed on the star systems. Her mind was clear. The decision had already been made. "We push forward," she said. "There's no going back now." In the far reaches of Council space, rebel forces had gathered, preparing for a final confrontation. The Council had concentrated their fleets in key sectors, but the rebellion was cunning. They knew how to strike where the Council was weakest, to infiltrate and disable their defenses before they could mount a serious counterattack. The Council's response was swift, their ships in full combat readiness. But humanity and its allies had a distinct advantage. They knew the terrain. They knew the places where the Council's surveillance was thin, where their supply lines were vulnerable. The final battle wasn't about who had the biggest fleet. It was about who understood the nature of the galaxy better. And the rebels understood it all too well. As the fleets of the rebellion advanced, the battle raged in the dark expanse of space. Explosions lit up the void, bright flashes of fire, illuminating the cold, empty cosmos. Humanity's ships, agile and unpredictable, tore through the Council's defenses with ruthless precision. But the Council wasn't finished yet. The fighting grew intense, a desperate clash of ideologies. The Council fought for control, for the restoration of peace. The rebellion fought for something deeper, for freedom, for autonomy, and for the right to determine their own fate. The cost of peace, it seemed, had finally been revealed. As the smoke of battle billowed across the stars, it was clear. The galaxy would never be the same again.